You're listening to Talking Fatherhood, a CHKD podcast. And now for your hosts, Andrew Jateau and Bryson Creighton.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Talking Fatherhood podcast. I am your host, Andrew Jateau, and I'm excited to be joined again by my co-host, Bryson Creighton. How you doing today, sir?
I am phenomenal, my man. How are you?
I am doing all right. I am very excited today because we have a very special guest. It is our first ever guest on the Talking Fatherhood podcast. So this individual is one of my closest friends, one of the most talented people that I know as well too. Someone who I've known for, he's blushing right now. You can't see it, but he's blushing and cheesing a little bit. Someone I've known for 20 years since my college days at Wright State University. And we managed to stay connected as we transitioned into adulthood, as we got married and got partners, and as we transitioned into fatherhood as well too, which is a feat in itself. So I would like to welcome Rambe O'Daniel to the show. Welcome. How you doing today?
I am blushing.
You are blushing.
A beautiful, beautiful introduction.
Yeah, and it's all true. So we are excited to be talking about today's topic. And one of the main reasons that we invited Rambe on today is because the three of us have something in common. And that thing that we have in common is that we are fathers who are working from home. And so over the past few years, with everything happening around COVID, with things changing just in terms of work-life balance, things changing in terms of people trying to be happy, women entering the workforce more, people's situations in their home has changed. And so the three of us now work from home. And so we have some benefits that come with that and some challenges that come with that as well, too. And that's what we'll be talking about in today's podcast. And so we are excited to dive into that topic. So what I wanted to start with today is just to talk about our journey to working from home. And so, where did we get started at in our careers? How did that start in our careers impact our life as we got married, as we had kids? And then what led to the transition to working from home? And then after that, we'll kind of talk about, some of the positives and the challenges that we faced along the way. So B, I'll let you get started. What has your journey looked like from the start of your career to being able to work from home?
So I've always been in sales. And so in the sales world, we were always in an office in my early career days, if you will. From there, moving to the consultant side of the house, it started to turn into more, I wouldn't say work from home at the time, but turned into more on the road. I spent a lot of time traveling and away from home before we had kids, and also once we had our first daughter. And
Right.
Once we had our first daughter, I needed to make some shifts. I didn't know how the travel component would work. And so made a few shifts there along the way, reduced the travel a little bit, still traveled a decent amount, but it was reduced in much of the capacity. And then COVID hit. And really, COVID was the catalyst, if you will, to working from home. We had a few instances where we could work from home, but for the most part, everything was either in office or on the road prior to COVID. So March 2020, and since then, I've been working from home practically full time. Once things started to open up, and the company that I worked with, we ran a lot of events. We traveled the country and did a number of different things. And so once those things opened up, we started having more collaborative moments in office and things of the like. But generally speaking, it was a 100% work from home environment. And now with the company that I work with now, it's the same thing. Everybody is remote. There is no physical office. And so that opportunity for an in-office type of environment just doesn't exist.
Right. Right. And I just want to go back a little bit just in
Mhm.
terms of like where you started with your career. How did your career impact your relationship? So like when you got married and you were working those hours and you were traveling, like was everything all good and then things switched
Mhm.
up once you had a kid, or did that impact your relationship at the start?
So in the early days, no. It was very me and my wife, we knew just what needed to happen, right? We had no other obligations. Our obligations were to ourselves and the things and assets that we had. And
Right.
so from a career perspective, it actually, to be honest with you, the travel component and for people that don't travel for work, like a lot of people think it's exciting and it's like you get to go to unique places, see unique things, and explore the world or whatever may have you. But they always forget that there's a work component and it's not technically fun no matter where you're going. Even though we might do fun things,
Right.
typically when I was on the road, I would work easily 12 to 18-hour days running events and things of the like. And so regardless of what's attached to it, it's not fun. But that being said, from a relationship perspective, what traveling did do is it allowed me and my wife to miss each other. And so when we were together, we were together. We cherished those moments. And it wasn't like I was gone for 6 months out of the year. It's more
Right.
like a quarter of the year, maybe a little bit more. So, in the going back to like 2015 when I started really traveling for work, it would be maybe a week, maybe two out of every month. Obviously, more so a week than the two, on a consistent basis. But given that time frame, it allowed us to miss each other. And so when I came home, it was like, okay, we can connect, right? And which is is very different today, which we'll probably get into later in the conversation. But yeah, we were allowed to miss each other. And really, it was a decision on my end uh, to look at opportunities to shift from traveling so much. When we gave birth to our first daughter in March of 17, um, it was more of a conscious decision on my end, seeing that, yeah, if I'm gone a week or two out of every month, that's a lot of weight on my wife while she's still working as well. And so for me, it was more of a conscious decision. It wasn't even a conversation between the two of us. It was more of like, hey, I'm exploring other options to figure out whether or not this travel thing is going to work with us having a newborn.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's to your point in a relationship with your partner, there is an importance to, having that time away so that you do miss each other, but it looks a little bit differently when you bring kids into the world. So it's not like, hey, I'm gonna take a week away from my child so I could miss them and, love them when I come back. Right. So,
One
yeah,
one
that,
100%. It
that
doesn't
makes
it
sense.
doesn't work that way with the kids. The kids are like,
Right.
"Where are you at? Where are you going?"
Right. Right. Yeah. What about you, Vay? What has your journey to working from home look like?
Well, I was working in hospitality for almost 20 years. And it was always a means of, it was always supposed to be a temporary job while I worked in my music career. And so waiting tables allowed me to make, like I was making great money and I didn't have to work 5 days out of the week. I could work 3 or 4 days and make a good amount of money, especially in New York City. And devote the rest of those hours the the career, whether I was performing, writing in the studio, just doing everything that needed to be done. Um, and it was pretty, it was pretty great. I think I ended up switching careers. So um, once we had Amari in 2018, I I felt like I needed to make a little bit more money and
Mm-hmm.
have something a little bit more stable. And I think I feel like the biggest thing was the time, just in general. Um,
Right.
Prior to having a child, I had so much time to devote to, I had all the time in the world. And like, I think about it now, like, I'm a rapper and a lot of, I hate saying I'm a rapper, by the way, because everybody's a different, I'm an artist. Um,
There you go.
but, um, but in that, I could spend during those days, I could spend hours at a time just writing verses, just dedicated to my craft. And as I had a baby, I saw that time just get, that window of time get smaller and smaller and smaller. And on one hand, it taught me how to work more efficiently because I needed to be able to maximize everything out of this short window of time that I had. But at the same time, I think it was a little tough for me early on because, I am someone who, a lot of my happiness is sort of based and wrapped around what I do for a living. And
Mm-hmm.
so to see that time towards that get smaller and smaller and less, that was a bit of an adjustment for me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so then I ended up working at a hotel, and it was cool. It was a great wage, monthly bonus, cash tips, 401k, PTO, significant raises. It was like my first big boy job. But the hours, again, the time and the hours made it very difficult. And ultimately I was missing one part of the day for my kids, whether it was in the morning or it was at night. Most of the time,
Right.
I was missing the evening time. So I wasn't there for bath time, story time, chill out time, whatever time. But um, yeah, ultimately, yeah, that was the background.
Okay. Yeah. So what made you decide to say, "Hey, I'm done. I want to be at home." Like, what led to that decision?
Well, the work-life balance was way off.
Right.
And essentially, I was working 4 full-time jobs. I was waiting tables. I was a creative. I'm a parent, and I'm also a husband, which I think sometimes parent and husband can be conflated at
Right.
times. I wasn't sleeping. I would wake up, you know, so basically at the hotel, I was working until 12, get home at 1. I can't really get to sleep until 2, and then I gotta be back up at 6 o'clock for the kids. And this was like for 2 years, I'm averaging 4, 5 hours at best a night. And so ultimately, it was my wife. It was my wife that was like, "We can't do this no more." It was my wife that was, because she was bearing all of that burden and sort of feeling like she was feeling like a single mother a lot of times. And for her, she basically told me, "Look, like we'll figure it out, but right now what is most important is I be home." Um, and that was pretty much it. And so at that point, I kind of had to figure it out. And yeah, it I think the importance of just being home not only to be there for those moments, but also, my son and my daughter, but my son mostly, he's at this place, he's at this age where he needs discipline and he needs a dad. And
Mhm.
there needs to be two parents to be able to carry that load. And I think that was the biggest motivation on my end, in
Right.
addition to my wife being like, I need you home.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah, and I think, you and I have talked over the years, and and I'm not gonna put your business out there. I mean, I will. Um, but I I think
I know you will. I know you.
to
Spill the
your
tea,
point
Andrew.
about
Spill the tea.
yeah, to your point about like work-life balance, I think like just work was taking a toll on like taking a toll on you mentally, as well too. And so it's one of those things where the decision is tough because you have all of these benefits that come with work, and you have all of these things, and like I can support my family. I'm getting these benefits, I'm getting these raises. I know that you are up for certain positions, as well too. But at the end of the day, the question is like, are you happy? Like, is this good for me, mentally? So I know like that was part of it
You know
as
what?
well too.
Sorry, not to cut you off. You know what's crazy, and you remember this.
Mm,
Um, I was also burning the candles at both ends, and I was exhausted to the point where, you know, in 2018, my wife, no, it was 2017. It was 2017, actually. Going into 2018, I spent New Year's in a hospital because I was exhibiting symptoms of multiple sclerosis and a stroke. The entire left side of my body has shut down. And basically, like, Sinbad, comedian Sinbad, and everything that he's
yep.
going through. So
Yep.
that's essentially what was going on with me, where I couldn't talk, I couldn't move the left side of my body. And they never diagnosed it. They just said it was an inflammation that affected my nervous system. But it was clearly stress induced. And
Right.
you know what's crazy? That didn't stop me.
Right.
That didn't stop me. And that just goes to show like how how hard I felt that I needed to go. And to your point, Andrew, it was, yeah, but am I happy?
Right.
You know? And yeah, I wasn't. And my health was clearly taking the back seat to all of that.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a deeper conversation as well too, because there's some components of like what we are taught as men, like how hard we have to work, and like the pressures on us and solely on us to provide for our families. And
Mhm.
even if it starts impacting us mentally or physically, it's like, hey, just push through it. But the fact that you were in a hospital, right, and everything that was going on with you, and I remember that as well too. Um, and that, like you said, that didn't change
So no,
anything.
I'm gonna keep going though. I'm gonna keep
Right,
going.
right. So I think that's challenging. And for me, my experience, I've just been in the mental health field, ever since college. I started working, doing in-home therapy, worked at a university setting, and, most recently working in a private practice setting, as well too. And the one big thing with therapy is that, and I'm sure you guys can relate, especially being in hospitality and being in sales and interacting with people every day, is that
Mhm.
it's draining.
Yes.
So
Yes,
Yes.
it's it's
100%.
it's
Oh my
it's
gosh.
emotionally and physically
Mm-mm.
draining. And like being a therapist, and same thing with you guys to a certain extent, is that I have to take on other people's emotions. I have to sit with it. People come and they dump everything on me for 8 hours a day. And so like at the end of the day, I'm spent. Like I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to do anything. I just want to lay down. And it worked when it was just, my wife and I. And
Mhm.
early on in our relationship, I let her know like that's just what I'm gonna need, because I'm And it was not the greatest thing because I'm giving myself into other people and I'm listening to them and actively listening and giving them feedback. But then coming home, not being able to do that for my wife. And, she was understanding because she's a school counselor. So she's in a similar field as well, except she's the opposite, where it's like, okay, let me tell you about my day and,
Mhm.
wanting to talk and let that off her chest. And I, being frank with her, I'm like, you can do that. I'm not listening, but you can. And she
Hey,
was like, she's
honest
like,
communication.
right. And she's like, I don't need you to listen. She's like, I just need to get this out. And it was like, cool, this works. And things change once you have kids. Like once you bring kids into the world, like what used to fly between your partner and you doesn't work with kids. Like with Bryson, like we talked about, those 2 weeks to where you're
Mhm.
gone for 2 weeks gives you time to miss your partner, and you come home and that improves your bond even more. Coming home and shutting down doesn't work with children. And so like that was one of the things that I was noticing. And even with the private practice, I had more control over my schedule, and I would allow, myself to be off on Thursdays and Fridays, but that would just mean that I would cram in so many clients Monday through Wednesday. And so like those days, I wouldn't see my kids, for the longest time. And so things transitioned to COVID, um, you know, or during COVID, and that just opened your eyes to like the possibility of working from home, and you start seeing all these perks and benefits. My daughter was home and had to do kindergarten virtually for a whole year. So it was her and
Mhm.
I at home. And even as stressful as it was such a bonding opportunity. Like we had these, Wednesday is field trip day. We'll go to the zoo, or we'll do something like this. Thursday is library day. But it just made us closer, me being able to be home. And we all know that being like going to work isn't just the 8 hours that you put in, it's the commute to work, is the work that you do after work. So like working from home, being able to go see my kids, even like before recording this podcast, go see them, and then 30 seconds later, you're at work. Like that ease as well too was beneficial. And so when noticing all the benefits of working from home, just deciding like, hey, this is what I want to do. And seeing like, hey, this is really helpful for work-life balance and helpful for like my happiness and mental well-being as well too. It's one of those things where it's like, okay, this is the right decision for me and for my family. But there are pros and cons that come with working from home. So I want us to take that opportunity to sort of dive into, okay, now that you've transitioned to working from home, what is a challenge and what is a benefit? So B, I'll let you go ahead and get started.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially listening to your journey and Vay's journey. Both of you have mentioned work life balance, and though when we shifted to working from home, that methodology of work life balance left my mind, and
Right.
it turned into there is no work life balance. Like especially when you work from home, but I think just in general how we think about work life balance, or how it's traditionally been spoken about, to me it's more of a rhythm. It's more of a harmonious approach, because our work is our life, and a portion of our life becomes our work, as long as you're doing what you love to do. Now, if you're not doing something that you love to do, then yes, those become completely separate components. And so when we talk about the impact of having to work from home, is that harmonious approach, that rhythm is something that you absolutely have to pay attention to,
Mhm.
because it's not, for instance, right now as we're recording this, my wife is not home. My kids are out in the living room, you know, playing together, and they can respect the fact that dad is busy,
Right.
and is not available. And so when we think about those components, most people get scared about having to work from home because their kids are home or whatever may have you, especially obviously here during the summer, and that creates its own challenges. And so, one thing that I missed, Andrew, when we were talking about our journey, there's a key component that I left out of my journey that was not necessarily work related per se. But it bleeds into this component of the impact of working from home, and that's the journey that my wife went through. And we can't go into details necessarily, nor do we want to. But my wife was injured at work in 2019, December 2019, so right before COVID, and that ended up being a 3.5, 4 year recovery time frame with surgeries and things of the like. And so when we think about working from home, that scenario added a whole nother layer of challenge,
Right.
because for me, it was work from home, be dad, and also be caregiver to a recovering partner. And so when we couple all of those things, and Vave talked about, burning the midnight oil,
Right.
for lack of a better way of putting it, that was me in that transition period. And so from an impact perspective, it makes some things easier, and it makes some things a lot harder. And the things for me, the things that it makes easier is, like you said, I can walk out my office door right before a meeting, say hi, check in with my kids, check in with my wife, say I love you, give them a hug, maybe even grab a bite to eat or whatever may have you, and go straight back to what I was doing before.
Right.
That's the easy part. The hard part is technically always being present, and on the surface always being quote unquote available, right? There's no separation, like, oh, dad's at the office, and so the kids can't talk to dad. The kids can't come and poke dad or or come and do whatever. The kids don't have that opportunity when you are at work in an office environment away from home. At home, you have to truly not necessarily put precautions in place, but you have to make sure that your kids understand the guidelines and rules around your working scenario, whatever that looks. For me, it's when my doors are closed on my office, do not come in here unless it is an absolute emergency, and if mom is not available, right? So there's all of these components that create significant stressors, and it also doesn't, for both me and my wife now. My wife also works from home running her business, and when we think about that, we see each other all the time.
How's that?
Well, it's very different from what
Right.
I described in my journey, right? I mean, when I was traveling, I got the opportunity to miss my wife, and obviously I still traveled once we had kids, so I got the opportunity to miss my kids. But like you said, coming back into it, it then turned into, oh man, like I got to be on for my kids as well. Coming back in, and so now it's even more. I would say it's even more amplified, because if I'm working all day or for whatever facet of the day I'm working, the moment I'm done, to your point, like I might be gassed, right? I might be, my social meter may be completely depleted and I've got nothing in the tank, but that's not necessarily acceptable, especially for the kids.
Right.
My wife might understand, but her too, depending on what her day has looked like, she either may be exhausted from her work, or if she didn't have a lot going on that day and spent more time with the kids, which is happening here during summer, and her being pregnant and all the things like, she's spending more time with the kids than not. That's exhaustive as well. So by the time I'm done and we come together, it's like she wants a break from the kids. I want a break just from anything.
Right.
But the kids are like, oh, now dad's free.
Yeah.
So we
Game
should
on.
all be doing something.
Right.
Right. So these are all the things that become stressors and also relievers, because you don't have that 45-minute drive home.
Right.
Now, again, that's a gift and a curse. That 45-minute drive home for me before used to be a nice time for me to come down to earth, reframe, right? Go through the mind shift of, okay, work is off, home is on, right?
Mhm.
Dad hat on, get ready to roll, have some fun, whatever it is. And you don't have that ability to make that transition anymore. So
Right.
those the stressors, relievers, all the things alike. And then I think from a partnership perspective, it again, it has to be a conversation. And it's been a conversation between me and my wife where it's like, hey, just because I'm now done working does not necessarily mean that I'm 100% all in right at this moment
Right.
on home, right? Because you don't have that shift, you don't have that transition. So, and again, to your point, like seeing each other, relatively speaking, all day, having access to each other all day, it makes moments where you need to break away. And
Mhm.
sometimes that's a hard conversation to have. Like, look, I love you. I want to be around you, but right now in this moment, I don't want to be around you.
Yeah. Leave me alone, please. Or go away. Yeah.
Right. So those are some of the challenges and I would say positive components of being a full-time work from home dad.
Mhm.
And it just gives you access to the things that you may not have been able to have access to. Like, one of my key components in going through this whole journey when we first had our daughter in 17 was, I want to be as present as possible. One of the things that I cherish is being able to take my kids to school, being able to see my kids when they come home, being able to sit down and have dinner, being able to put them to bed, right? They talked about this, not missing those moments. And even with all the travel over the years and all the stuff, I can honestly say, even with all of that, was able to not miss a lot of moments. And so I cherish that component. And that's a piece that I will never be willing to give up, regardless of what I do.
Right.
So yeah, that's the impact in my world,
Mhm.
from my perspective.
Yeah, and I think as you were talking too, just in terms of like how we sort of spoke about our transition to work from home, like that's a transition for the kids as
Yeah.
well too, because in their eyes, um, they sort of grew up seeing work as this parent is going away. Right. So this parent is going away. I don't have access to them. They are at work. So it's confusing for a kid when you are at home and you are saying, I am at work. They don't really understand what that looks like.
Mhm.
They don't understand those boundaries. And so it is a matter of us on our end, sort of retraining our brain into, okay, let me sort of separate and segment. This is work. This is home, but making sure that the kids know that as well too, and having that conversation with them is really important. So, what about you, Vay? I know for you, it's been something that's been more recent. I think within the past few months, and so what has that transition been like for you in terms of like positives and challenges that you've noticed?
Yeah. I definitely, it's funny talking about kids not knowing the difference, because definitely I'm the disciplinary of the two of us for the most
Hmm.
part. And so when I told Amari that, I'm gonna be home more,
Like, no.
it's like, oh, great. Perfect. But no, it's been everything. Being home has been everything I wanted it to be.
Mm,
Um, it so far it
so
has,
far, yeah.
it aligns. It just so happens that me being home aligns with what I want to do career wise. It allows me the time to focus on the creative, on the writing that I do, and also be there on both ends of the day. And mentally, it's done wonders for me as well. Like I'm happier. In general, it's just great because, like I said earlier, like a lot of my happiness is wrapped around what I do for a living, and I can't. For some people, it's not like my wife is couldn't be more opposite in that way. Like for her, a job is just a job, but her family is most important, and so um, I had to recognize that part in her and make sure that I could be present for her as well to be able to fulfill that part of her happiness because family is so important and that does require me to be present. Um yeah, yeah, it's just been it's been great and I'm just happy. I'm just thankful because I also have a little bit of perspective, having worked almost 20 years in an industry that I'm not passionate about. So now I sort of have this attitude that's like, I'm not going back, you know, whatever it takes. And that kind of bleeds into the or not drawbacks, but more the challenges. But I'm not going back. I'm too happy. I'm too happy. I'm doing what I want to do. I'm seeing my babies and I can see a difference. I can see a difference in them as well. And the only thing that I wish, and obviously, you can't go back, but I am able to spend more time in my daughter's life, who is one. I'm more present earlier in her life as opposed to my almost 6-year old who now I'm sort of catching up on what I
Mm.
feel like is lost time. And
How do you think that'll change things? Just in terms of like being more present in her life, like, what do you think would be different now that you have that time to be there?
the bond is definitely, and there's some personality things too. Like I already know, like me and her, like we gonna be like peas and carrots. We're very much alike in some ways. Like I think that's my music child. And so I think that there's already sort of a bond there.
Right.
And I think also there's a sense I find that she reaches for me as much as she reaches for mommy, as opposed to the 6-year old who, he's already a mama's boy. He's a cancer. He's a mama's boy.
Mm.
But it was hard to not take personally. Sometimes it felt like he preferred mom over dad. And a lot of that was just outside of my control, whether it's, me being there and just who he is as a person, just being, sort of a mama's boy. But, um, you know, there's definitely a difference I see with my daughter
Right.
and, in a way that fills my heart. And, she definitely, it does something to you.
Right. Thank you both for sharing. And I, just want to share a little bit of my experience real quick. And, I sort of sound like a broken record, B, because we talked about this in our last episode where
Mm.
like, my greatest joy has always been like the relationship I've been able to build with my daughters. That's just something that I always take pride in. And so being at home allows me to continue to foster that relationship and continue to have those opportunities. And it's not even necessarily big things, but it's like the little things, the ability to, especially, now that they're home for the summer, to go hop in their room and just sit in there for like 5 minutes, to go sit on the front porch or to do these activities with them, things that you would otherwise miss by being in an office setting for, significant amount of time. I'm able to have those opportunities. And to, your points as well too, when we first moved here and we, heard that we were too close to the school for busing, initially I was like, I gotta take them to school every day, but that has turned into a moment that we have together where I'm able to take them to school. I'm able to pick them up, have those moments where we talk about, okay, what was the best part, worst part of your day? And so being a work from home father has allowed me to continue to build the type of relationship and closeness that I've wanted to. And so that's been a blessing. Just in terms of the challenges to what you said, Bryson, the always having to be on is a challenge. And I think with what I do for work, with the two paths that I've chosen, having one that's a traditional work from home 9 to 5, but then also entrepreneurship as well. And this will sort of relate to you, Vay, where there are no set hours for entrepreneurship, right?
Right.
There's like my business doesn't close.
Right.
So
Mhm.
it's like I always have to be ready, and there is a level of creativity in what I do, and I might not be creative between the hours of 8 to 5. It might be like 6 to 9 at night where I'm feeling the spark to be creative, and need to step away. So I'm sure that happens for you too, Vay, where it's like, I because you can set hours for yourself at home, but that's not necessarily when you might feel the most creative.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I've I've actually I've had to learn how to work within certain hours for the sake of my marriage. To Bryson's point, to be present, because I too have big problems with being present because the nature of the work requires you to sort of be on call almost. And
Right.
if that creative spark hits you, or sometimes if a collaborator wants to call you because they have an idea for something, it's just I've had to learn how to set those boundaries. And my wife and I, we sort of made the deal that, okay, so between basically the hours of 9 to 5, those are the hours that I will work.
Mhm.
And once the kids get home, I'm daddy. And
Right.
so I've had to learn how to, because there's a mental shift that that
Mhm.
Bryson was referring to. And for me, understanding that and knowing that, it's like, okay, since 5 o'clock is my cutoff time, and it's going to take me a minute to mentally get prepared, that means whatever work I'm doing, I pretty much need to start to wrap it up by 4:30, so I
Mhm.
can then mentally prepare myself for, as I like to call, second shift, and
Right.
and and make it happen.
I think what's important that seems to be a theme is that mental preparedness. Whereas with a commute, you used to have that.
Mm-mm.
So you used to have that 40 minutes to know, like, okay, I am about to walk into this situation, a stressful situation. It's going to be
Mhm.
dinner time. It's going to be time to put the kids down to bed. There's going to be a lot of things happening. And when you're commuting home, you do have that ability to take that time to mentally prepare, as opposed to work from home where you're just stepping out the door and your kids are there, waiting for you. And so I think it is figuring out what works for you and what works for your situation so that you could be mentally, physically, and emotionally available. Since you working from home, there is that more time to be that and more time to be present. I do want to start wrapping up, prior to us hitting record, we talked about how we wanted to keep it to 40 minutes. I think we are already over that, which I figured this conversation might be. And I know there's even a lot of things that we left off and a lot of tangents that we could have gone into, and would definitely
Absolutely.
love to do a part two and really break down the work from home situation for dads. But I think something that we can do to be helpful for our listeners right now is just to give them some tips or some takeaways, some advice for fathers who might be struggling with the transition, or even dads who may not have transitioned yet to working from home, but may be considering that transition. I think if we can each just drop a few seconds or a minute of like, hey, this is something to keep in mind. I think that would be good. So I can go ahead and start. My big thing always is, are you happy? So are you happy with whatever choice you have made in life? And so when I was doing therapy, that's sort of what it always boiled down to. Is like that's the main question. Like, okay, are you happy? If you are not, then what needs to change? And that allows for like deeper introspection and deeper thought as well too. And so I understand like not work from home is not a solution for everybody. But it's understanding, are you happy with your work life balance? And I know I was not happy to be in a position where I was giving all of myself to other people and not having anything to give to my family at home. And so I knew that something had to change in that moment. And so for me, work from home was a solution. And once again, it's not for everybody, but ask yourself that question: are you happy with the way that things are? Do you feel like you are able to play the role in your partner's life and in your kid's life that you want to? And if not, then what needs to change? And so that might be a change in careers, that might be a change in hours, but life's too short to be unhappy. As cliche as that sounds, but it's the truth. Like we could go at any time, and do you want to spend it being unhappy? And so that would be my advice to dads struggling with this.
I can't disagree with you. I use a little different terminology, if you will, probably in the same vein though. Um, I never strive for happiness, especially when it comes to work or from a career perspective or business perspective or whatever may have you. And the only reason being is because happiness is it's a, and Andrew, you know this, just given your work, it's a feeling, and your happiness will change throughout a day, throughout a week, throughout a month, even if you love what you're doing. And so for me, I always go off of, is there something that gets you excited and gets you like amped up to go out and do in the work that you do? And if that is the case, then find a way to do that as much as possible. And in that same vein of whether you use happiness or whether you use exhilaration like I do, in terms of, hey, is this something that I truly, truly enjoy and get excited about? It is that harmonious approach. It is making sure that working from home works for who you are
Mhm.
and how you operate within your relationships, whether that's your family, friends, whatever may have you, because there are some people that should not work from home. They
Right,
don't
right.
have the discipline to do so. They don't have the wherewithal to make sure that they make the right choices on a daily basis, from a trust factor within themselves. So that's the first piece. And Andrew, you alluded to that, is just making the decision around, does it actually work for who you are and your lifestyle?
Mm-hmm.
Secondarily, I would say, if you take on this venture of working from home, understand that you typically will work more, especially if you're doing something that you love.
Mm-hmm.
You will find additional hours to spend working, whether that be, the avenue that, Andrew, you and I have taken this avenue. You've gone further with your side business, but whether you're working a 9 to 5 and looking to jumpstart a business on the side, or looking to develop more skills on the side, or whatever may have you, or if you're in Vay's position where you are running your business 100% of the time, you will find hours to work. And so that second component is, be wary about that, but also just be very upfront with yourself and with your partner and your family on what you're willing to sacrifice to get the things that you want. That might be sleep. Vay, you alluded to this, sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night. Andrew, you know this. I am notorious for that. That has been my lifestyle for a very, very long time. I am not a heavy sleeper in terms of time. And so I will go to bed at 1:30, 2 a.m. and I'll be up at 6 and operate that way. And it's been that way. So you just have to figure out what is your engine and what is your sacrifice to get what you want to get done while still being present. That's the thing that I can be very proud of, is being present for your family. Because you mentioned this for your wife, but for me, I have a totem pole of life. I sit at the top. You got to take care of number one. Number two is the family. Your career, the money you make, all of those things can be replaced. You are irreplaceable for your family. And so that's the motto that I operate under.
All right. Cool. What about you, Vay?
Man, y'all literally took all of my points.
All right, let's wrap it up.
All time. No, I think no, seriously, you did though. But it was stated in a way that was much more you were much more articulate in a way. And I think, just to sort of piggyback off of the points that you both made, I think that it's important to make time for we as people, we will always make time for the things that are important, regardless. And so I think that, to Bryson's point, it's important to be honest with yourself and recognizing the things that you need versus the things that you want. And the things that are important, you make time for. But I think that it's just a matter of being honest with yourself. And the time is never right. And this is more for the people who are thinking about making the jump. The time is never right. But honestly, I wish that I had done it earlier. That's another thing, because my wife always sort of was behind me, but there was, for whatever reason, I love the cushion of having the money and the benefits. I didn't have the time. And I found that, and this is going to be very cliche, but it's so true. I found myself having to make the decision between money and happiness. And while, yes, sure, I may take a temporary financial hit in making this jump, what I gain in my mental health, not really physical, because I need to exercise more, but definitely mental.
Right.
What I've gained in my mental health, money can't buy. And I think that, also, I was just always afraid of being broke. That's always been my things. Like, I'm never going broke. Who's that rapper? NBA Youngboy, never broke again? That was me.
That's your lifestyle.
And
Yeah.
I realized that money isn't always the answer. And sometimes to find that happiness that you're talking about, Andrew,
Mhm.
it may require you to take less money, at least temporarily, to get you to that place mentally. Um, so yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. And also to Bryce's point, everybody's not maybe cut out for it, and that might be something that you recognize while doing it, because it does require it does require a supreme level of time management, organization, and mental preparation that
Right.
everyone's not cut out for. And
Right.
it's also important to recognize that as well.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I appreciate both of you sharing, and I appreciate everyone who is listening as we approach the 1 hour mark. But I do want to thank everyone who is still listening. Want to thank Ron Vay for being able to join us today, and just to give you guys a little peek behind the scenes. It took some work to get him here. A lot of technical difficulties.
Hold on.
Yeah, he had to get a new laptop. He stopped using Safari. He's a Chrome user now. So
I don't know if I'm all the way sold on Chrome yet, but you know what? It got me in the room with y'all brothers. So I'm cool
it-
with it.
right. So it was a good conversation, and I'm looking forward to plenty more. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Talking Fatherhood. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this episode. We'll catch you next time.